Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
A very good morning to all of you. Today we'll continue our discussion on parameter estimation. So if you recall, in the previous lectures, we started discussing about parameter estimation, first using the point estimator, where we used only, we defined our estimator from the sample, and we used that statistic to really compute a single value and expected that value to be very near to the population parameter. Then we saw that there are disadvantages of this method, as that value, it never said about how near the estimated value was to the actual population parameter. So then we considered about giving a range of values, that is, we defined an interval which was again a random interval. It would vary, that interval would vary from sample to sample. So we defined an interval known as the confidence interval, which would give you a range of values, or which would give you a range, and you expect your actual population parameter to lie within that range, and that interval was constructed with a certain level of confidence, namely 95% or 99%, which which can be interpreted as, if you do an infinite estimation of such random intervals, then 95% or 99% of the time that interval would contain the true value of the population. So we discussed about estimating the population parameters using single sample, and in the process we estimated intervals for population mean for 2-3 cases, when the variance was known, when the variance was unknown, whether the sample size was big, and when the sample size was small. We also estimated the confidence interval for variances, so where we use the chi-square, where we applied the chi-square distribution, and also we estimated the interval estimation for proportion. And all these interval estimation used the principles of point estimators and the application of the sampling distribution of various statistics, namely your z statistic, t distribution, chi-square distribution, and all that. And we also applied central limit theorem for the cases when the population was non-normal and the sample size selected was quite large or big, so that one can apply central limit theorem. Today we'll concentrate on estimating confidence intervals for 2 samples. And these studies are important when we want to compare 2 independent populations for certain characteristics. Let's say, for an example, you are interested in procuring some paint, either for your house or office or something, and one of the qualities which you would be concerned about is the drying time, and you are really want to compare 2 manufacturers, and you would ideally choose, if the drying time of a paint is quite if the drying time is small, then you would prefer that one, and you see the different claims of different manufacturers. So then in that case, these are completely 2 different populations, but an analyzer has to test whether the claims are correct, so that one can do by the doing the testing for a single sample. And if you want to compare 2 different processes, 2 different claims, 2 different products, all those things, then you have to either test for the differences in means, or the ratio of the variances to see whether the difference is significant or not. So mostly when we do such sort of analysis where comparison or testing of two methods or two processes are important, then we build this confidence interval based on two samples. These two samples are two independent samples, and the sampling was done from two independent population. And when you do the testing on these two samples, you claim something about those two independent populations. So first we'll try with building the confidence interval on difference in means of two normal populations. So we have two independent normal populations, let's say X and Y, and we do sampling from these two normal populations and try to study the difference of means of two normal populations. And when these studies are not done, normally they are done on a similar characteristic of the population to do some sort of comparison. Okay, so let x1, x2, xn, so you draw a sample of size n from population 1, or let's say population X, which is a normal population having a mean mu1 and a variance sigma 1 square. So here also we'll start with a very simple example where we know the variances. Although it is a bit unrealistic, but just to make our example simple, we'll start with populations with known variances, and then gradually we'll move towards populations where the variances are unknown. So let x1 be x1, x2, xn be a random sample from population 1, and y1, y2, ym be a random sample of size m from population 2. And here our objective is, or our interest is in estimating the difference between the means, like mu1 minus mu2. So we want to see whether we want to find an interval of estimating the difference between the mean. So when it is 0 or very near to 0, we say that there is no significant difference between the population parameter. And if there is a big difference, depending upon what sort of alpha level we are talking about, then we can conclude that whether yes, there is a significant difference or not. Okay, so these sort of confidence interval estimation play a very important role in inference statistics, where you want to make some conclusions about the population. So you can treat the difference in sample mean as the best estimator for mu1 minus mu2, because we know that sample mean is the best estimator for the population mean. So therefore, if you want to estimate the differences in mean of two populations, so the best estimator would be the difference in the sample means. Okay, so since we are drawing the sample from a normal population, so we know the distribution of the differences of the sample mean. This is something which we had previously discussed. So we know that it will also follow a normal distribution with a mean centered at mu1 minus 2, and variance of such a sampling distribution would have the variance sigma 1 square by n plus sigma 2 square by m. This is something which we have already discussed. So we have constructed a test statistic, and we also know the distribution of the test statistic. Now since it will follow a normal distribution, so we can always make a transformation to convert this normal distribution to a standard normal distribution, so that we can get a z statistic. Okay, so we just subtract the mean from the numerator and then scale it by the standard deviation. So then our x bar minus y bar minus mu1 minus mu2 scale by square root of sigma 1 square by n plus sigma 2 square by m becomes a standard normal variable, or it becomes a test statistic, which is a z distribution. Now once we know the sampling distribution, and when it's a z distribution, it is very easy to write the probabilistic statements. Okay, so we can always construct a 1 minus alpha times 100 confidence interval for such a statistic. So you can write the probabilistic statement as shown in the slide. So where minus z alpha by 2, where the z statistics lies between your minus z alpha by 2 and z alpha by 2, where alpha would decide the level of confidence you want to construct. And after you can see a bit of manipulation, you can see that your mu1 minus mu2, which is the difference of the two population means, lie between these two lower and upper bounds. And if you carefully see the bounds, x bar minus y bar, this is something which you can compute from your sample. Z alpha by 2 is known because that is something which you predetermine while fixing your alpha. As we have already said, we are drawing from a population where the variance is known. So sigma 1 square and sigma 2 square are already known to you, and nm m are the respective sample size. So you can easily compute the lower and upper limit with a certain degree of confidence. Now this was a simpler case when we talked about that sigma 1 and sigma 2 square were known. Now supposedly the population are such that where the variances are unknown, that is, you don't have any information about sigma 1 or sigma 2. So then if the sample is large, if you are drawing a sample with a large sample size, supposedly your n and m values are quite large, then what you can do, you can compute the corresponding sample variances. Let's say your capital S1 square and capital S2 square, and you know that for large samples, the sample variances are very good estimators for the population variances, and you can use them in place of sigma 1 square and sigma 2 square, and you can construct the statistic and which would follow an approximate z distribution, which would follow an approximate standard normal distribution, and you can compute a lower and upper bounds. This is something which you can do. And there are cases when the sample which you draw are not of very large size. This is many a times we face these situations. So in that case, we again have to, then it becomes a bit complicated because you cannot really use your S1 square or S2 square as the best estimators of sigma 1 square and sigma 2 square. So in that case, we can have two simplifications. One is the assumption that the population variances are similar, they are equal. So the assumption is sigma 1 square is equal to sigma 2 square. Let that quantity be sigma square. That means your samples you are drawing from two different independent populations, but the variances of those two independent populations are equal. So in that case, so we'll study first that case, and then we'll go to the most complicated case where they are unknown and they are different also. Okay, so for case A, which assumes that the variances are equal, then we know that from our previous discussion on special random variables and sampling distributions, n minus 1 times S1 square by sigma square will have a chi-square distribution with n minus 1 degrees of freedom. This is something which we have studied earlier when we discussed about the distribution of the sample variances. Similarly, m minus 1 times S2 square by sigma square will have a chi-square distribution with m minus 1 degrees of freedom. So this is something which we can compute, but let's remember that sigma square is still unknown to us. So if we do so, and then as these two are independent chi-square distributions of n minus 1 and m minus 1 degrees of freedom, if we add them, from the property of chi-square distribution we know that the sum of two chi-square distributions with different degrees of freedom will result into another chi-square distribution where the degrees of freedom are now the sum of those individual degrees of freedom. So taking that into account, we can say that n minus 1 times S1 square by sigma square plus m minus 1 times S2 square by sigma square. So these two are individual chi-square distributions. Now we are adding them up. So from this sum you can say that the resultant sum will be a chi-square distribution, but the degrees of freedom would be now n plus m minus 2. Okay, this will be your degrees of freedom. Now from the previous thing we knew that the x bar minus y bar minus mu1 minus mu2, if this is divided by the standard deviation, then it would follow a z statistic. This is something which we know from our discussions on normal distributions. Now since we don't know about the variances, we can define something called SP square, which is generally called as the pooled sample variance. So you can see that more or less it is a weighted sum of S1 square and S2 square. So if we define the pooled variance as n minus 1 times S1 square plus m minus 1 times S2 square scaled by m plus n minus 2, then we can scale it. So we can construct a new statistic such that you divide, you know that x bar minus y bar minus mu1 minus mu2 scaled by the standard deviation is your z statistic, and if you divide it by square root of chi-square n by n degrees of freedom, that would result into a t statistic. This is something which we know from our previous discussions on special random variables. So you can construct a t statistic out of it, so that x bar minus y bar minus mu1 minus mu2 divided by square root of sp square. Please be very careful. Now it is sp square, which is your pooled variance, by n plus sp square by m would follow a t distribution with m plus n minus 2 degrees of freedom. If you recall, when we dealt with estimating confidence intervals for mean in a single sample case in the previous lecture, we also used t distribution as a, let's say, test statistic to construct these confidence intervals. If you remember, we compared, or we used a t statistic with n minus 1 degrees of freedom. Now here you have to be very careful when we are discussing about the difference in means. We have to consider a t statistic with m plus n minus 2 degrees of freedom. The degrees of freedom are important because you know that the t distribution, its shape changes once you change the degrees of freedom. It is a symmetric distribution, but it's a distribution with heavier tails, and this changes considerably when you use different degrees of freedom. So when we construct our confidence intervals, we have to be very careful about the degrees of freedom we are using to construct them. So once you know the sampling statistic, so you can easily construct the required degrees of freedom depending upon what confidence you want. Now this was the case when the variances were unknown to you, but you could compute a test statistic assuming that the samples are drawn from populations having equal variances. But let us be more realistic and think that's what would happen if the variances are not equal. Okay. So in that case, if the variances are not equal, then we can again construct a t interval which is known as Welch's t interval, where the degrees of freedom have a very complicated form which is mentioned in the slide. So this is the derivation is something you can try, but it is not part of your course. So whenever you face situations where the sample size is less, then you can use this Welch's t interval to compute a confidence interval. So these are the cases when you can compute confidence intervals on differences of two means coming from two independent populations. Okay. Now there is again a special case known as the paired t interval. Now this happens when your samples are not independent. Let's say you want to test about an efficacy of a drug. Okay, so what you do, or a process or a teaching method or whatever. So what you do, you select a sample, okay, and then you apply. Let's say you want to compare the let's say values or efficacy for 2 labs for, let's say, blood cholesterol level. Okay, so what you do, you select a sample. Let's say you selected a sample of 10 people and they were sent to lab 1. Okay, so then that lab 1 performs a test, and for each of these 10 elements it would give the value of the, let's say, blood cholesterol level. Okay, now you want to see whether, and now you want to compare the results of lab 1 with another lab, let's say lab 2. Then what you do, you send the same sample of 10 persons to lab 2, and again that lab 2 would conduct a test and would give, let's say, would give its own blood cholesterol values for those 10 persons. Now you want to see whether the results of these 2 labs are more or less similar, or there is a significant difference. Okay, so that becomes very important in medical diagnosis. So here what you see, the difference is that the sample on which tests are conducted are not independent. They are the same sample. Similarly, when there are a lot of tests performed on twins, identical twins, okay, so there you cannot treat the twins as completely different sample. Okay, so many a times when you perform tests on samples which are not independent of each other, then you do a paired t interval confidence interval computation. So once we know the scenario where we have to apply them, so many a times you want to have differences of 2 means, of 2 different measurements or methods, outcome of 2 methods and all that, but your samples are not completely independent. Then whatever tests we just discussed previously are not exactly applicable. So in that case, what is generally done is that, suppose you have a paired measurement, let's say xi and yi, on the same population whether a measurement of a quantity performed on same population or dependent population under different conditions, we are interested in finding a confidence interval for the difference of the means of paired measurements. Okay, supposedly that is our aim. That what we can do, we can consider the difference for each of the element, which is like di is equal to xi minus yi. Now your di is again a random variable because it's a difference of 2 random variables, and then you are interested in estimating what is mu d, or difference in mu x minus mu y. So now you have reduced the problem to that of a single population of measurement of independent differences. Now these differences will have single values. So now you can use your, let's say, these differences are independent. So you can use your methods what you used for estimating confidence interval for single sample. So in this case, the confidence interval would be again a t distribution with n minus 1 degrees of freedom, where your small st is the variance, sample variance of these differences, and n is your sample size. Okay, and d bar is the mean, sample mean of these differences. Okay, so you have to be very careful while computing the confidence intervals. You have to be careful whether the populations are independent or dependent. So then you go for different test statistic for estimating the confidence intervals. So this finishes our discussion on estimating confidence intervals for differences of two means. So we discussed for independent populations the differences of two means where variances are known, where the variances are unknown but the sample size is quite large, so that you can use central limit theorem, or you can if it's a normal population, you can use the sample variances are as estimators of population variances. Then we also consider cases when sample size was small and the variances were unknown, more realistic cases. And then we also knew how to compute intervals when the populations are not completely independent. Okay. So next thing which we'll try to compute would be the confidence interval for difference in population proportion. In the previous lecture, we estimated the confidence interval for population proportion for a single sample. Here we'll discuss about the difference in population proportion. Okay. Again here these studies are very common if you want to compare the proportion of diseases in two different states, two different cities, or something which belongs to a particular class where when these quantities can be treated as a binomial random variable. So mainly in comparative analysis, these interval estimates are used. So let a random sample of size n1 and n2 be taken from a large population 1 and population 2. Again, remember these two populations are independent here, and let x1 and x2 observations belong to a certain class of interest. Here class of interest can be opinion, can be certain diseases, can be certain drugs, can be many other things, can be let's say some physical attributes if you are a physics student, like tensile strength, the conductivity, thermal conductivity, electrical. So it can really be related to many attributes, whatever you want to test. So then we know that P1 hat, which is the ratio of x1 by n1, and P2 hat, which is x2 by n2, are point estimators of the proportion of the population P1 and P2. So this is something which we know. This is something which we had used earlier to estimate in single samples. And we also saw that these x1, x2 are now random variables with a mean n times P1 and variance n1 times P1 times 1 minus P1, and so on. Similarly for the second population, you can also x2, you can also see that. So now using central limit theorem, because remember these are binomial random variables, so for large samples we can use central limit theorem, and we know that the distribution of these proportions are normal with mean P1 and variance P1 times 1 minus P1 by n1. Similarly for the second proportion, it would be centered at P2 with a variance P2 times 1 minus P2 by n2. So again, by the principle of independence, the difference between these two proportions, namely P1 hat minus P2 hat, would be a normal distribution centered at P1 minus P2 with a variance P1 times 1 minus P1 by n1 plus P2 times 1 minus P2 by n2. So once we know the sampling distribution, and it's easy here because the sampling distribution is a standard normal variable or a standard normal distribution, we can always write the probabilistic statement of computing a confidence interval. And for let's say 100 times 1 minus alpha percentage confidence, we can write the probabilistic statement for the confidence interval as shown in the slide, and you can easily compute the bounds, the lower bound and upper bound for this difference in proportion. So if you see the first statement, the lower bound is minus p1 hat minus p2 hat minus z alpha by 2 times the square root of the variances. Here you can see that the variances has p1 and p2 as parameters which are still unknown to us. So we can substitute for them their estimators to calculate the confidence interval. So just let's take a small example to see how these are used. It's a very small and simple example. So compare the prevalence of a certain disease. It can be anything, COVID, hepatitis B, between two countries from the following data. So you draw two sample size and you see the occurrence of hepatitis B in these two countries, and so the sample proportion is known, and so you can compute the differences to calculate the two bounds. So you can say that country 1 has 23%, around 23% plus minus 0.027 plus minus, let's say, 2.7 percentage of this disease compared to country 2. This is just a simple observation which you get from the given table. Similarly, so we saw about the differences in mean, differences in proportion. So there's one more thing left, which is if you want to compare variances of two independent populations. So we know that if you want to compare the variances, we can't take the differences of variances because it will be difficult for us to get a proper statistic. But we very well know that we can always construct a confidence interval for the ratio, that is sigma 1 square by sigma 2 square, because we know that n minus 1 times s1 square by sigma 1 square follows a chi-square distribution with n minus 1 degrees of freedom, while m minus 1 times s2 square by sigma 2 square follows a chi-square distribution with m minus 1 degrees of freedom. This is something we know from our discussion on chi-square distribution and distribution of sample variances. Now if you take the ratios, when we just divide by their corresponding degrees of freedom and take the ratios, we know that this is a F distribution with degrees of freedom m minus 1 and n minus 1. If you remember, we had discussed F distribution when we talked about the distributions which are derived from normal distribution, right? So F distribution is a derived distribution from normal distribution, and it's nothing but the ratio of the chi-square by n degrees of freedom. It's a ratio of two chi-square distributions scaled by their respective degrees of freedom. Here also we have two chi-square distribution and we scale it by n minus 1 and m minus 1, and if we take the ratios, is nothing but a F distribution. So it's good that we are getting a statistic and we know the sampling distribution of that statistic, which is a F statistic here. So now you are seeing how we are applying the T statistic, chi-square statistic and F statistic for inferential statistics. And then we can write this ratio, which is nothing but sigma 1 square times s2 square by sigma 2 square times s1 square. S2 square and S1 square are the sample variances which we can compute from the sample, and hence it is easy to write a probabilistic statement for computing the confidence interval. And if you do some small manipulations and use this property of the F distribution, this is something which we had discussed when we discussed about F distribution. So we can create a confidence interval for the ratio of the sample variances. So once we know the confidence interval for the ratio of the sample variances, we can also take the square root to get the confidence interval for the ratio of the samples, for the ratio of the standard deviations. Okay. Let us take a small example. The feeding habits of two species of insects are studied. So the sample sizes are given, the sample mean is given, and also the sample variances are given. So now it is asked to estimate with 95 confidence interval confidence the ratio of the two population variances. So everything is given. So we can get the values of F statistics from standard tables. Nowadays there are a lot of statistical packages, so you can get it from those packages or from the standard tables. And once you get that, you just have to plug in the values in the statement for the confidence interval or for the formula for the confidence interval to get this. So you see that the value 1 lies between these two values. So you can say that there is no, since the 1 is there in the confidence interval what you have estimated, so you can say that there is there is no evidence there is a strong difference of variances in the feeding habits. But normally this F statistic or is not used in many analysis studies, because this strictly works for normal population, because this is a derived distribution from a normal distribution. For non-normal distributions and all that, the test or this confidence interval, the method of computing this confidence interval is not very sensitive. So many a times people discard using this, but nevertheless if you have a normal population, one can always use F distribution to compute the confidence interval for ratios of two independent population variances. So as per the course we are talking about here, our discussion on confidence interval ends here. Okay, so we really had discussion over 3 lectures around parameter estimation, both point estimation and confidence interval estimation. These confidence interval estimation are widely used, and we know how to compute confidence intervals for both single sample and two sample analysis. We can compute confidence intervals for means, variances, proportions, differences of means, differences in proportions, and ratios of variances. And in the next lecture, we'll see how to again use this confidence intervals to test our hypothesis in hypothesis testing. So hypothesis testing also forms a greater part of your inferential statistics. So we'll discuss that new topic in the next lecture. So what I would urge all of you to go through the methodology of computing confidence intervals for single population and this two sample analysis, and try to compute the confidence intervals on your own. Try to do those small manipulations which we do in the probabilistic statements to see whether you are getting the confidence interval whatever it's given in the slides or in the books. Try to learn what statistic you have to use for different scenarios for computing confidence intervals for, let's say, population mean, variances, differences in means, proportion, etc. So that when we use those in hypothesis testing, it becomes easier for us. So point estimation and interval estimations are two important aspects of parameter estimation, and we have learned both how to do point estimation using a test sample and creating the point estimators, and also we now know how to compute confidence intervals using our point estimators and knowing about the distribution of sampling distributions, or let's say knowing about the distribution of various statistics. Okay, thank you very much.